Hi there, I'm Iona Gilbertson-Hart and this is my review / notes, spoilers, of Romeo and Juliet, currently on the West End from March through to June 2026, starring Sadie Sink, Noah Jupe and directed by Robert Icke. Here's the programme. Look at that, heck yeah. And then I made a shrine behind me too. So I want to state my qualifications for this review. Romeo and Juliet's one of my favourite plays. I saw it on the West End, as you can see, with Kit Connor and Rachel Zegler. I also saw the ballet version, and the person who directed its name has currently escaped me, but I'll put it somewhere because I will come back to it. And then I wrote my EPQ on it, my extended project qualification. So I love Romeo and Juliet. I also did a monologue from it for my drama school auditions. Okay, so I'm just going to start with my notes. So basically, when watching, in the interval and afterwards, I would think about what we know of the play. Realistically, Shakespeare's known for his lack of directions, and, everyone's kind of slightly followed the same sort of vibe, so I've kind of generalized the vibe that people typically follow and then looked at things that are different in this production. So I'm just going to rattle through my notes quickly, say how I feel about them, and maybe you'll enjoy it, I don't know. So at the beginning, it starts and Juliet's in bed. This isn't normal in a typical production, and I really like that this production kind of centres around Juliet, because I feel like sometimes in some productions Juliet could be seen as a side character, because although it is Romeo and Juliet and she is 50% of it typically, Romeo typically has more screen stage time, he has more lines, it's kind of more, he meets Juliet, he kills her cousin, he gets exiled, I don't know, okay, I feel like maybe it gravitates towards Romeo's story a little bit more than Juliet's. So I think it's really interesting that we as if I was part of it, that Robert decided to push it more towards Juliet's point of view. And so it opens up and Juliet is in bed. Oh yeah, I forgot to say another one of my qualifications. I also did a short production of this at a RADA summer school, by the by. And she was in bed biting her thumb. And then we entered into the, is it Samson and Gregory and Peter? I think it's those two. And they're all, do you bite your thumb at me? And then they're like, I bite my thumb at you. And then it's basically, do you want to have a fight? Because biting your thumb was shown as a sign of aggression. And Juliet had been chewing her thumb thoughtfully, which I think is interesting. She wasn't in the scene, she was kind of just observing it. But I think this was interesting because it shows that, the simplest of things could spark a fight in this, high stakes feud. And yeah, I've lost my trail of thought for that one, but it was good. And then they had a fight. So there was the Montagues were on one side, the Capulets were on the other side, and then they kind of fought, and they kind of crossed over Juliet's bed at points to get to one another, showing how, she's innocent, she's just a bystander, she's just watching, she's had nothing to do with it, but somehow she's still involved and it's invading her space. And I think that's a really good metaphor. I'm not complete, these are my thoughts on what's happened. A really good metaphor for how this feud is invading her life. And it's got nothing to do with her really, apart from the fact that her family hates this other family. Okay. So I really liked that. She also looked at one of the, see, this was before I quite knew, because there was just a bunch of men on the stage and I was like, so who's playing who? I had done the Do You Bite Your Thumb at Me before scene. Alas, I can't remember who she looked at, but she did look at one of them and she was startled. So maybe that was, honestly, I don't know why. Maybe that was, I need to think about it. See, this is the problem with being quick. Hold on. I think maybe because she looked at it and she had a slight feared expression, what is this? It's an alien to me. And so I think that maybe that shows her youth and how all of this arguing and potentially like adult situations is impacting on her youth, and it's like forcing her to grow up in a way, maybe. I don't know, because then she does grow up early eventually. I mean, obviously you've got like the whole time situation, people are more likely to get married at 14 then than now, you know, that whole situation, but still. Okay, one thing I really liked about this production, and this production did really think on a lot, was there were clocks at the back, and there were two on each on sliders, and they would sometimes be like that, and they would sometimes intertwine, and then sometimes when there were like a scene on this side, and it's like if there were some Montagues here and like some Capulets there, then it would show their timelines, and then the timelines matching up, and then the timelines maybe being different. The timelines were never directly different at the same time, but they were different. Sorry about that, that was confusing. I really liked this, and it really did make me think about how little time they had. I did think about Hamilton a little bit, but moving on. It really makes you think about how little time they have and how hastily this whole thing moves, because I feel like most people know it's kind of like a 3-4 day situation, but maybe they don't, maybe they forget that. So it's very great having the time permanently on the wall. I loved that. And yeah, I think it's great for how little time they have. It did also make me realise, that's what I was going to say, that, you know, everyone's like teenage love, maybe just like sleep deprivation delusion is also what happened, because I think I counted like, did Romeo sleep 4 hours throughout these days? Because that's what I counted, because he was awake through the first night, kind of slept for, you know, and then he went and killed someone. He didn't sleep much. Right. Also, at the beginning, you know, when everyone's kind of climbing over Juliet's bed and biting their thumbs at each other, Romeo, like, I hope I'm back, okay. Romeo comes out from underneath, from in Juliet's bed. So Juliet's kind of like, it's a double bed. Juliet's up here. I'm really phrasing this badly, and I'm no competition for Mickey Joe Theatre, and Romeo's down there, and then he kind of just pops up, and we didn't know he was there, unless he did. I didn't know he was there, and I think this is kind of good, because sharing a bed is quite a, you know, marriage relationship kind of thing, and yeah, they're unawarely sharing a bed before they've even met, which I quite like, because in my thoughts of it, it interprets as you know, fate, and they were always meant to be together. They were sharing the bed before they shared the bed, you know. Yeah, I thought of it like that. And it also happened later on in the play, and honestly I kind of forgot when it happened again. If I come back to it, I'll let you know. Okay, so oh yeah, and also with my notes, so when I said they're okay, so how I said it might be fate that they were sharing the bed, because, you know, they're together before they're together. On my notes here I've put because their lives are intertwined, like they were always going to meet each other, they're kind of like in the same space at the same time, because maybe if it's like, it was kind of sort of like a split stage as well, so they're kind of sharing the same bed just on their side. Maybe that doesn't make sense. It makes sense in my head. And the other thing I noticed is sometimes on the stage, like for example during Romeo and Juliet's marriage, we had Mercutio and Benvolio, and they were both on the stage, and they were talking about the potential upcoming fight. You know, if you stay out here, it's going to end up in a fight. While Romeo and Juliet were getting married, they marry some scenes, they put some scenes together, and I think on one hand, for that example, that was a really nice choice, because it showed like the happy matrimony with the foreshadowing, and you know, how some people are like, if we stay out here, the Capulets are going to attack us, while a Capulet and a Montague are getting married. I like that. But the other thing I thought about this choice was that it firstly shows how intertwined they are, but secondly I thought about the idea, you know, putting scenes together like this is inevitably going to save time, and with the clock on the back I thought about how pressed for time they are. Maybe it shows, you know, we've only got like 3 days to wrap this up, so we're going to have to put some scenes together to save time. I liked that, if that was what it was for. They also had some really loud music and bright lights. Every time there's a flashback, there would be like a pop of white light. There was some really loud music, typically like clock ticking kind of vibes. I really liked it because it like jump scared the audience often, each time, and it kind of like wakes you up and you're like, whoa, which makes you then more focused on the play. And I then thought about, you know, this light and this sound, because they did also have some practical lights for torch, which they would sometimes shine out to the audience. Sadie was looking down that torch and I was like, you go girl, because I've looked down a light before. It's not fun. It's not fun. I'm going to tell you that. And but it invades the audience in a way, because the audience is sitting there and they're like, yeah, I mean, they're going to die, but at the end of the day, like, we've got nothing to do with it. Until the white light gets like, boof, in your face. So it kind of just wakes you up. And I thought, because that is quite invasive to the audience, maybe that shows how the feud, you know, is invasive to Romeo and Juliet's lives, because realistically they did nothing to impact it until Romeo went and killed someone. Right. I was also thinking, I think this is further down in my notes, but I'm going to say it now. I'm going to say it for later. Okay. So they did redo some scenes as well. So in Act 1, they would, because it's all fate and, you know, what would have happened if the letter got there, if they didn't meet, or if, like, no, Romeo fell off the balcony and died. Like, that wasn't one of the things they did that I just came up with that. But, you know, like, so many things had to happen in a specific way at a specific time to get us to where we got. So the first kind of, like, they would do the scene and then we'd have, like, boom, flash of light, music, and then we'd be back. And I always admire, I know, you know, once you're, like, there, you get used to it and it's not actually that hard walking around on the black stage, dark stage. But I did kind of admire how the actors got back into position and didn't fall over or break themselves. Right, so the first scene that they redid was when Capulet gave the list of, like, invites to the party. First time he gave it to the nurse. Nurse can read. Nurse is going to go out and she's going to invite Tybalt or whatever, whoever's on the list. And Romeo and the Montagues are never going to know about it because they're not invited, so why would they know? And then, boom, let's run it again. And he gives it to Peter. Peter can't read, or at least I don't think, no, he can't read. So then Peter's going around and he sees Romeo and Benvolio, I think it was, and he's like, hey, can you read? And Romeo's like, sure. I mean, he has a bit of banter before, but essentially he's like, sure. And then he reads it, and he reads it out, and then he's like, hey, you seem nice, do you want to come? And because Rosaline is on the list. Another thing I do typically notice, Rosalind, I don't know how you would necessarily pronounce it, I think people change it sometimes, is sometimes she just completely skipped over. Well, she never really skipped over because she's in, like, balcony scene. She's not died, but it's like, did my heart love till now for Swear at Sight. Actually, I think that's the meeting scene. That's the meeting scene, never mind. You know, but sometimes, like, her character can be made big or it can be made quite small. And it was certainly medium in this because we never saw Rosalind, whatever. We never saw her interact with Romeo at the party. But, you know, we see her name on the list and that's kind of what spurs Romeo to go to the party. Which is what has spurs him in every adaptation. But we don't always see that, you know. We don't always see the list. But then I actually think that, never mind. This is the script. But I arranged it on that. So there, maybe Robert Icke rewrote that. So I was also thinking about rewriting Shakespeare and then having to, like, Shakespeare your writing. That is a choice. I don't know. All right. Yeah, so that's what led Romeo to go to the party, which otherwise he wouldn't have done, which otherwise wouldn't have met Juliet, and then maybe he would have lived to Thursday. Hey! Okay. Juliet was played by Sadie Sink. Sadie Sink is American. She did it in an American accent. This is completely understandable. Shakespeare's hard. Changing your accent, that's hard. I mean, it's kind of unnecessary. Technically, they should maybe even have Italian accents, and I've never seen an Italian Romeo and Juliet. So hey, maybe we're all in the wrong. I don't know. But her mother and her father did both have American accents, which makes sense if you think about it. But I was slightly surprised because I was like, this is a West End show, so if you're going to like ship in one American, it's fairly expensive. But if you're going to ship in 2 more, it's more expensive. Unless they were just here already. I don't know, but I was thinking about the budget, which is probably not what I should have been thinking about. Alright. Another thing I noticed is Mercutio especially, but Romeo joined him sometimes. He did a lot of accents. There goes my poster. He did a lot of accents. Right. He did a lot of accents. He did an Irish accent, a French accent. I think it was a rough British accent. I lost track of the accents after a while. It was impressive. I was like, yeah, you go girls. And but I think that this shows their youth. This production really played on their youthful energy. And I think this shows their youth because they're kind of like carefree, you know. We're in a serious situation, but I'm just going to like whip out an Irish accent. Okay, the situations were never that serious because they, you know. But still, I feel like it shows youthfulness because it's like playful, trying new things, playful ability. There you go, I can do an Irish accent kind of vibes. Right. Another scene they redid. I'm sorry, my notes maybe aren't in the best order. I'm sorry about that. Another scene that they redid was the scene where the nurse goes to speak to Romeo. So in the first scene, she goes with her shopping bags and Peter, and Mercutio, okay, I'm going to come back to that. Mercutio drives her away with his weird sexual harassment. And then they went, flash of lights, sound, and then we redid it, and Mercutio was like, did all this weird stuff, but this time Romeo was like, get out, and Romeo got him out. So the first time, Nurse didn't talk to Romeo, which meant like the whole marriage situation wouldn't have been relayed back to Juliet. But in the second time, where Romeo got rid of Tybalt, she did talk to Romeo. Therefore, the marriage situation was relayed back to Juliet, so they could get married. So that's important, because if they don't get married, I mean, I'm sure they probably, I don't really know what would have happened if they didn't get married, but it's important they got married. One thing I noted at the time was because I did Thou Knowest from the balcony scene for a monologue, I was kind of reciting it with Sadie Sink, not out loud, obviously, because that's rude. But they changed a few words, like, for example, she's like, lovers' perjuries, they say Jove laughs, is what I learned, which was in my Shakespeare book. My Shakespeare's book's up there, there's no point getting that down. But they changed it to God laughs. However, I went through the back, not of this, of that script, and they actually changed a lot of words. Don't know why, because Jove to God. I suppose maybe people don't know who Jove is. Maybe he hasn't transferred to modern culture. I don't know. But they did change a lot. However, I didn't actually see Jove in the changed words. But I noticed that. No, I didn't really have a thought on it. I mean, it was kind of weird. Like, why would you change it? Maybe. I don't know. Seems like a pretty pointless thing to change, personally, but you know. One thing I did really like about this production was the youthful energy of the main characters, especially, which I think really added, even though they did increase Juliet's age from 14, no, she's 13 turning 14, and in this she was 15 turning 16, I'm pretty sure, unless she was somewhere around the age of 15, can't remember if she was turning 15 or if she was 15, you know? No, she's 15 turning 16, but essentially, I like this because, well, there wasn't much meaning to it, essentially. It was just so that it wasn't such a paedophilic, weird relationship. They were kind of closer in age vibes, unless it was for a different reason. I don't know that reason. But they really aged down their characters by the, you know, like especially around the balcony scene, Romeo would be like, yes, or Juliet would be like, wait, or she never did that actually, but you get the vibe. Or she'd like scream because she'd be like, yippee, young child vibe scream. And it did, Juliet ran around a lot. She ran around the time things around her bed quite a lot, which reminds you of a toddler. And actually, I'm going to come back to this later, I did just remember, there's this girl who plays younger Juliet later, and she does also run around, so that's a fun link, which I just realised. Balcony scene. Romeo directed quite, so you know in the balcony scene where he's like, I can't actually quote his lines word for word completely, but he, you know, the vibe of he's like, she speaks, should I speak back or should I just listen? That's normally his like internal monologue, internal questioning. This production, he directed it to the audience around him and, you know, asking them, should I speak back to her? Should I, you know? And that brought the audience more into the production because now we're being asked. I mean, I wasn't asked, but they were. He also moved along the front a few times, so people were going to have to move to let him through. And then he'd run back because Juliet keeps calling him back, obviously. And Juliet was like, they both had a lot of like nerves, like, oh, what do I say? I'm just so in love. And I really liked the youthfulness of, I badly explained that. So Juliet, when she was like making decisions of what to say next, it was especially Juliet, she'd like she'd be like going to nurse and then she'd come back and she'd be like running up and down the stage, which shows that she's like, what do I do? What do I do? I'm just so in love and I don't really know what to do. That I don't know if that's exactly why, but I think that did also add to the youthfulness of, you know, she's young, she hasn't experienced this before, she doesn't exactly know how to play it, you know. Also, okay, so I thought that because Romeo's talking to the audience, it makes the audience feel more involved and they're like, oh wait, maybe I'm part of this. I mean, you're not, but maybe I am. And with like the lights and everything, I thought this had then some epic features, Brechtian structure. And the idea of Brecht, it wasn't Brechtian at all. They also did do some multi-rolling, but the multi-rolling wasn't obvious. So it was definitely not a Brecht play. It just had some epic features. But, you know, Brecht's idea was to get the audience to not just watch it like mindlessly, but to think about it, especially, you know, political events. And I thought that was quite an interesting idea for this production because in a way it is politics. These people are dying because of this like feud that's going on. I don't know. I liked that and got you thinking, slightly Brechtian. Heck yeah. Right. I said that already. One thing I didn't like was so essentially the end of the stage, I really need to get better at this because I'm like not showing you anything. The end of the stage, that's where Romeo was sitting and that was like off the balcony. And then, you know, when he like climbs the balcony and when he's talking to her, he is typically on the balcony. There's like a balcony edge separating them, you know? He's like further down on the balcony, she's further up. In this, they were both in her bedroom. I was not quite sure. I mean, I understand maybe, I mean, half of this play is just like people sitting in Juliet's bed, mostly Juliet, but you know, I don't know, I feel like they could have made a bigger divide because they were kind of just standing there together and I felt that I didn't completely see the divide enough, you know? It didn't feel forbidden enough. They were like, hey, it's forbidden, but I'm just going to go hang out in your room. I don't know, I feel like maybe they should have been kept a bit more separate. There should have been a bit more, there should have been more separating them because in this, I mean, I know it is the script, but just like the way it's blocked, Juliet sees Romeo, the nurse is like, heck yeah, let's go get married, and then they're just kind of like together, like there's nothing separating them, really. There's no threat. He's like, I climbed over the wall, and she's like, you're gonna get killed, and he's like, But where's the threat? Where are the people who are going to kill him? They're not there. I mean, they're not normally there, but I didn't feel the threat. I felt like he just yodeled over a wall, you know? Okay. Yeah, Romeo bounded onto the stage with a youthful energy. Juliet bounded around with a youthful energy. It was very youthful. I liked it. I also, Sadie was very good at bringing humour into it by, you know, when she's talking to Romeo and she's like, what time shall we meet tomorrow? And then she's like, oh, I'm coming, nurse. And then she's like, what time? It was funny because she was shouting to the nurse and then focusing back on Romeo and changing so quickly. I liked this. I think it added to her personality. I think quite often Juliet's personality is washed over. She's a girl in love. But, and that is Juliet. 13-year-old in love. But I like that this added more personality to her. She was a bit more like sassy. Okay, she wasn't very sassy at all. Don't know why I said that. She was, you know, she was more standing up for herself, more doing. She had more personality. I'm really bad at explaining myself. She had more personality, okay? You know, take my word for it. I'm sorry. Wow, that was really mean. I'm sorry. She had more personality. Okay. I liked this. That was my name. Mercutio. Okay. I didn't like him as a character, you know? I didn't like the character. And this made Tybalt low-key looked like an angel compared to Mercutio. Mercutio was around here sexually harassing people night and day, and Tybalt was just kind of chilling. I mean, maybe he tried to attack Romeo twice, but both times he held off. Tybalt never really did anything wrong, and while Mercutio was being an asshole. I didn't like this because, you know, normally they're supposed to be like, oh, but who's, like, there's no winner. They're both as bad as each other. And this Mercutio was like up here, Tybalt was down here, like, you know, I don't know, Mercutio was just on one. He was like pulling down his pants. He was doing weird stuff. I didn't like it. But at one point, he was also comedic relief. He got a lot of laughs. Was that necessary? I don't know. But also at the beginning when they're at the party, he was drunk. And he was very funny drunk. This is one thing I did like. And he was, you know, very funny drunk and everyone was laughing and it was like, oh, what a jolly time. And then he, like, went for Romeo. He was like, Romeo, get back here or whatever, because Romeo's yodeled over the balcony. And suddenly his funny drunk turned very angry and scary. And I liked that. I liked how quickly the switch happened because it does show, you know, oh, it's all fun and games until he goes and kills someone. Okay, he never actually killed anyone, but, you know. After Romeo kills Tybalt, Romeo goes into Juliet's bedroom with a white tank top on, and it's covered in Tybalt's blood. I thought this was great because, you know, Juliet's looking at this guy, love of her life, with her cousin's blood all down him. And I think that just really, like, brings to light the situation that he's going into her bedroom and he's like, hey, my love, and he's got her cousin's blood all over him. And she's just like, another day at the office. She just takes off the tank, which I thought was good. I mean, obviously they would do that anyway because I feel like that's what you know, that's like what would happen. But I thought that was good because he comes in with the blood, she just takes it off, discards it, it's gone. It's a clean slate. He basically didn't kill anyone. Slay. Right. Also, before Romeo enters and Juliet's in her grief about her dead cousin, she whips a dagger out from under her pillow. I mean, I'm kind of like, on one hand, I'm like, this is nice because it shows she always had the capacity maybe to kill herself. Maybe it adds more character to her in the way that, you know, everyone always sees Tybalt and Mercutio as like the rowdy ones and they're like the fighters, but maybe Juliet's a fighter too. She has a dagger under her pillow. But at the same time, I was kind of confused. Why is girl whipping out daggers? What's going on? I don't know. So maybe to think about. yeah, I've put like maybe to show the audience that she has one ready, but why is it under her pillow? And then I also put maybe she's already thinking of death, because also she's so quick to, you know, be like, if I marry Paris, I'm just going to go kill myself. And the idea of marrying Paris has already kind of been sprung upon her. That's why the party was held. So maybe she's already having these thoughts. Because with Romeo or without Romeo, she probably still doesn't want to marry Paris. The other thing I noticed was that the entire play was like a beige set Juliet wears. I mean, her wedding dress, it appears white when it's not on her, but it appears kind of like paley peachy vibes when it's on her. I don't know, maybe this is light. I don't know how that happened. Maybe it was like the stark lighting. I don't know. But essentially, most everyone in the cast, apart from at the party, wears black, beige or white, which I thought was very neutral. I liked it. It was very stripped back vibes. I'm not completely sure why they did it apart from the strips back, but I did like it. Juliet wore a red dress, like a strikingly red dress, and I was actually supposed to be researching, because here's the thing. I think the Montague colour is typically red and the Capulet colour is typically blue. Because I'm picturing Juliet in a blue dress right now. But I'm not sure. I need to research, but if the Capulet colour is red, then that shows, you know, Capulet colour is 5s. If the Capulet colour is blue, then it kind of shows how she's already moving over to the Montagues to be with Romeo. But I should know that. I should know what their colours are. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, badly researched. I'm just going to let you know now, because I can't leave you like that. Right. Never mind, Montagues are typically blue, Capulets typically red. She's just wearing her family house colours, which I then also think is great, because when she meets Romeo then, you know, she's wearing her house colours. It's kind of clear if you think about it. I mean, obviously, however, if I had a house colour, would I wear it all the time? I don't know. But I think it does represent that, because this is where she meets Romeo, and she's very clearly, I'm Capulet, because I'm wearing this red dress with red shoes. All right. Then we had the interval. The next scene that they redid was where Romeo gets the letter and where he doesn't get the letter. So they did it once where the friar's person gave it to him and he was like, hey, my wife's not dead. And then, well, he didn't actually do that. And then we did it again where the friar's person is like, I'm sorry, I haven't been able to deliver it. And then the friar's like, Scheiße. And then we do it, and then they did it immediately after, a scene where Romeo walks in and Juliet just wakes up, you know, because she woke up 10 minutes earlier than she did in real life. And he's like, hey, wife. And she's like, hey, husband. They didn't do that either. I'm sorry about that. And then the hey, wife, hey, husband bit, they did do the walking in. And then they redid it where he walked in and she doesn't wake up because she's not awake yet. Right. And then on their death scene, Romeo kind of goes in with a torch. And earlier on in the play, when it's just like at the beginning, Mercutio and Benvolio both have a torch. And they're like, we're going to have to get to the Capulet party quickly because this torch is going to run out. And I think that's quite good because the torch is going to run out. It kind of shows, you know, how earlier they were like, the torch is going to run out, the torch is going to run out. The torch does run out because later they have the torch is like a practical light. I thought it was the only light, but then when they turned it off, there was another light beaming down. Realistically, would the torch be able to light them all that well? It was a practical light. It appeared to be the only light on the stage, but maybe there was more. And it cast very strong shadows, very stark. Liked it. And then when Juliet, who dies first, Romeo goes to die, he puts the light face down, so you can't see the torch anymore. The light's gone, and so it does kind of show how the light goes and dies and takes Romeo with it. And then it's a very stark lighting. Then Juliet wakes up and she's just about to kill herself when suddenly she's like, Oh, wait, I forgot something. My goodness, I'm getting so, like, flippant at this point. I'm just like, what's going on? Okay. When Juliet was taking the potion in her bed the night before, how sometimes in the scripts, depending on the adaptation, spirits and ghosts and past dead people enter the tomb. Well, they entered her bedroom. Tybalt came in with his dagger, and he came and she pulled the dagger out of him, and then he lay on the end of her bed. And then the nurse got all jaunty. She was like cackling, but there was like a sound effect that she was like, it was like ha, it was like evil, and the clock went a bit funny. It kind of just showed, you know, she's kind of falling into the sleep stance. You know, like she's just leaving, going out of it a bit. But I think, what the hell do I think? I think it was good to have Tybalt walking on. Hold on. I think it just reminds the audience, you know, Tybalt has died and it was Romeo who killed him. And I do think it also creates space to then not have the spirit seen later, but then to replace it with, so back to where I was before that detour. So Juliet's just about to kill herself, and then she's like, whoa, what's that? Because there's like something. And she gets the torch, which was put out. Maybe Juliet puts the torch out, not Romeo. No, Romeo didn't put the torch out. Scratch that. Juliet put the torch out. Sorry about that. She gets the torch and she's like, whoa, what's that? And there's like a little mini Sadie Singh, like redhead vibes. I was thinking this is like one of the first times Sadie's mini me hasn't been played by her sister JC, I believe. But anyway, that's by the by, that's irrelevant information. There's a little mini Sadie going on, well, mini Juliet, and she ran around, similar to what Juliet's been doing this entire production. She's been running around, and it was like, and she ran around, and it was like, oh, it brings the humanity back to it, because we're with these characters for like 3 days. How well can you truly know them? How human can you truly, like, you know they're gonna die. I don't know, maybe people don't fully humane, I don't know if that's a word, these characters. But it really brings the humaneness to it, because you're like, Shiza, she was a child once. She still is a child, actually, and that's an issue. Not in this play only. Well, it is an issue. Like, why is all this happening to a 13-year-old? Okay. And then, so little Juliet comes in, runs around, and then leaves. And then old Juliet comes in, walks around, and leaves. So it's like young Juliet, 15-year-old Juliet, old Juliet. It shows where her life could go if she didn't die. You know, she could become old Juliet. And then, I'll have it written down here. And then Romeo walked through because he left at some point. Yeah, I can't remember I think when she was like, wait, who's that? And then he just got up and walked out, because then it kind of went, oh, also, so it was in very stark lighting, very strong shadows, very strong spotlight. And then it went into a warm light for this flashback scene. I'm so sorry, this is probably like the worst review ever, but whatever, it's my notes. And then Romeo came on holding a baby, which was nice. It showed, you know, if only we weren't dead, we could have had a family, we could have grown old. And then yeah, and then an old Romeo came on, and he kind of hugged old Juliet in the corner, and then he came over and hugged Sadie Sink, normal Juliet, and you know, showing how their relationship would have gone. And then And then Noah, current Romeo, it's kind of confusing to explain, came on with little Juliet, and he was like holding her, and then he placed her, and she was like floppy, and loppy, and he placed her on the tomb, and she kind of lay there, and then Sadie was like, wake up, and she was kind of dead, I think. So that shows, you know, it's such a shame for someone so young to die. And Sadie Juliet isn't that much older. And then it all snaps. Little Juliet goes, Romeo's back on the bed, old Romeo and Juliet are gone. And I think that was really, really beautiful, because to my knowledge, as someone who hasn't seen like the last 500 years worth of Romeo and Juliet adaptations, that hasn't really been done before, and it brings so much humaneness to them. Also, I feel like Romeo and Juliet are people who we don't think of past 13. Not quite sure. I think Romeo's, it's like often speculated on how old. I think he's often depicted as around 16 to 20, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong. But we don't see them past these ages. We don't imagine them past these ages. They are a young couple in our heads. So to really see them grow old, Romeo and Juliet could have had a family, they could have grown old, and it's something you never think about. You never really, well, I don't know, maybe some people do, but you never really think about these people and their stories and what could have happened if they didn't die, unless you watched Anne Juliet the musical. So clearly someone did think about it quite a lot, because they wanted, well, technically they didn't write the musical because it's used songs, but you know the vibe. Anyway, and then it goes back to this dark light. Romeo's there, all these other people have kind of gone off, and then Juliet takes the dagger and I'm putting it to my stomach, but you can't see that, to her stomach, but she never actually does it. I'm gonna do it to my chest, because then you can see. She has it here, and she's kind of like making like, oh, I'm about to die faces. That was not the face she was making. She was making about to die faces, and then the lights suddenly go black, and she didn't die. Which, I mean, if you're gonna do a double bill of that and then Anne Juliet, heck yeah. But she didn't die. Well, obviously, I mean, it's intended, like, she probably did die, unless she didn't. And on this, I'm like, on one hand, I'm like, oh, it's like kind of open-ended, like, did she die, did she not? But then that is kind of overshadowed by the fact that she typically does die. It could have also been done because this is Juliet's play, it's her thing. Also, just thought about it. Okay, so essentially, it's Juliet's point of view practically the entire play. We're following Juliet predominantly. And once you get to that point, you put it in you, but you're not going to be point of viewing. Juliet doesn't point of view her own death. Really? Does she? So I just thought about that. Maybe that's just where it ends for her, because past that point, she's dead. Apart from the fact when she's like, ooh, dying, because obviously you don't die instantly from stabbing yourself. Depends where you, I don't know. I'm not a scientist, but you don't. In normal adaptations, it takes a few seconds. So yeah, that could be quite interesting in the way of, you know, this is where her point of view ends, because this is where she ends. If it is for that reason, I liked it. If it is for the reason that this is where her point of view ends, I would have really liked that. If it was for any other reason, I'd have rather seen her die. That shouldn't be taken out of context. For my acting notes, I thought both Romeo and Juliet felt more spirited and youthful. Really liked that, because it really brings the youth to the production. It really just ups the energy. It's so sad most of the time, apart from the fact when we're all happy and in love. And I think it just does bring more happy energy to the production, which is generally just quite a somber, solemn situation, especially for the audience, because they're like, well, they're getting married, but they are going to die. I mean, the audience isn't normally like that. I found the acts of Romeo and Juliet had a great clarity, and I felt they really understood the words, because with Shakespeare, if you want the audience to understand the words, you have to deeply understand the words. And for a typical word, Shakespeare likes his metaphors. He likes to like repeat things over and over. He's like, in a Macbeth speech, he's like, there's enough blood to like fill the ocean. And then he goes and repeats it again. Like, I feel like Shakespeare, like, once he would be like, I can just picture him, like, from like Hamlet as well, like sitting in his little like attic thing. And he'd find a metaphor, he'd have a thing, like, he'd have a sentence, and he'd find a metaphor for it, and then he'd be like on a roll, and he'd like have like 10 metaphors, so he'd be like, I can't choose, so I'll just put them all in. He does that quite a lot in Macbeth. Probably didn't make sense. I feel like maybe only a few people will understand what I'm on about. But yeah, essentially, I felt they had a really good understanding of the text and a great clarity. I heard all of the words, which was great. And yeah, I felt it easy to understand. I mean, I understood it anyway, but I feel like to other people, maybe it would have been easy to understand. The friar sometimes muffled. I feel so bad giving criticisms. Every now and again, I'd be like, come again? I did hear Romeo muffle once, but that's when Juliet is like, Romeo, and he's like, my love. I only know that because I know the script. I didn't hear that from him. I was like, I heard like, ooh. But that's when he was scrambling up the stage. To be honest, I don't know, like I probably wouldn't have heard him anyway. He's going up, he's scrambling up, his like arms are everywhere, which means his mic's probably like flailing around, you know. I don't know. But you got the vibe, because he's scrambling, he's like, hey, I don't know, you know? You got the vibe. Oh, and this was based in the 80s. That's my final thing. I only know that because I saw Sadie and Noah in an interview, see through the camera. I wasn't there personally. And they were like, the 80s. I kind of get that from the clothing and from the lack of phones. It's a vibe. So, yeah, those were my thoughts and what they changed. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. That was probably just one huge mess. But if you enjoyed it, then yay. Thank you for watching my Romeo and Juliet notes, because I'm not quite sure if it was a review. I did say my thoughts on the things they did, but you know, okay. Thank you for watching. Greatly appreciated. Have a great day. Bye.